So previously we explained what event sourcing is in general. Now let's talk about what it is and how it is used in computer science and programming. Computers are all about manipulating data. They consume, produce, transform, serialize, move around, and store data. Let's say we have an application that people use to sign up and purchase stuff. So the data about users' information and the products and their purchases will be stored in some sort of relational or NoSQL database. Of course, it is impossible to anticipate and foresee all possible requirements of future. Having said that, let's say the program is working fine for several years and suddenly some new requirement shows up. This requirement is asking for the count of times that people have changed their names or addresses. With the given analysis several years ago, the programmers did not know that apart from storing the current full name, they were supposed to store every detail about the changes as well. Now basically, the data is lost. Although it is possible to start storing this info, but doing that, we will be able to only answer questions about now on, and all those worthy data have been lost through the years that people have used our application. Why? Because the analysis and the business requirements did not predict that this will be $1 million question to be answered in the future. So what is the solution to this hard problem, and what role does event sourcing has in all this? Should we store every possible data that we could only because we might need it in the future? Well, yeah, you cannot put a price on data. And is it possible to do so? And how should we get assured that we are storing everything? Well, it is not possible to store things that you don't have and things that your requirements did not force you to ask for. But the least you could do is to not throw away the data you have at hand. But you might answer, you don't throw away data. I mean, who does that? And you might think that you have stored any data that your program have generated, received, or worked with inside your database. But you'll be surprised that what you have in your database is at best the snapshot or the last state of your data. And at worst, most of it is overridden, ignored, or deleted. What you've got in the database is the projection of the journey that your program and users have been through, but you have not recorded the journey itself, which is the real source of truth and has the most value. Event sourcing is recording and keeping the journey and the whole story about all the entities in a form of series of tiny steps that each has a specific title and properties. Event sourcing is recognizing these events as the only source of truth. In the previous example, using a column in table for storing full name and then overriding it every time it is changed, it will only give you the most recent full name. But let's assume that every time the user changes his name, instead of updating the name column in the database, we append to the journey and update the story of the application and store this new event that says user changed name, which carries all the info about this change, such as what is the new name, when did this event occur, who did cause this change, and many more. And now if we iterate over all of the user changed name events within our journey, 10 years from now or anytime, we can answer questions like how many times a specific user has changed name, when was the changes and why and who did the change, what was the username at some specific date, did the user change his name before purchasing some stuff in any wild requirement that might come up at future based on business needs, which could be easily answered having the journey and the story of how we got there. You might think that event sourcing is new and not used that often, but you take a good look around you, you can see that all banks store data as a series of events. I mean, your balance in your bank account is not a value inside a column of database. It is the projection of all money transferred events. Without the journey of monies and the history of how accounts wind up with some current balance, the frauds could not be detected. Or, as another example, accountants are not allowed to edit any mistake by eraser. They register all the transactions and events serially, and they compensate mistakes by appending a new event to the journal, explaining what was the mistake. Losing the journey and not recording it inside the journal, the accountants could wind up going to jail. Or even when using a version control system like Git, you are using event sourcing underneath. The Git does not store the current state of all files that it tracks. Instead, it stores only the changes or events after every commit with an intention revealing message, and also a bunch of other info alongside it, like who did these changes to these files, and when did the changes occur, and what was the changes to each and every file separately. And when you ask Git to time travel your working directory to some date or commit at any time, it plays all commits/events from the beginning of time, and it applies all the changes, and what you get at last is the current state of all files in your project at that requested time. Up next, we will try to explain a bunch of benefits that you get by event sourcing, and then hopefully we will jump to examples and projects. So stay tuned.